Hello, lovely ones. I'm slightly early. I never know quite how long it's going to take to connect and get the get the connection going. Basically, on more ways than one, not just the Wi-Fi connection, but the connection between you guys knowing that I'm going live, which still makes me think of the children's TV program we used to have in the UK on a Saturday morning. Because I know it just takes a while. I have my screens open over here, and I can see that it's only just saying that I'm live. So, well, hopefully you knew I was live, but I mean the actual going live thing. So, I think we've already got. I'm not actually sure if we've got a viewer on or not. So if you are here, do say hi. Give thumbs up, share, invite other people along, join in the conversation, and make comments below as well, so that we can have the conversation. Because the whole point of doing the confidence question time is so that it is a conversation. It's not just me prattling on for 20 minutes, half an hour, or an hour, as it has been a couple of weeks. Due to the beautiful interaction from people. But the whole point of this is to set a topic, and the topic for this evening is about boundaries, as it's something that has come up in conversation with more than a number of clients actually in the last week or so. And so I thought it would be something that I would bring to the table and see kind of where the conversation went with it. I've no idea what I'm going to say. I've kind of got some notes, because what I have realised is that this topic is huge. And whilst I've got my perspective on it, and whilst I've got my viewpoint and where I'm coming from, and my angle both personally but also as a coach, I would love to know what your thoughts are, because I think there are probably going to be some common themes as I talk this through, as to it's not going to just be about boundaries in the sense of to do with work, or to do with relationships, or to do with family, or because I very much do go along with the philosophy of how we do one thing is how we do many things. So, thank you for the thumbs up, whoever gave Dave that. I can't see, by the way, just so that you know. I can probably just about see sometimes someone's photo. So unless I know who the person is when you're giving the thumbs up or the hearts or whatever, I can't really give you a name check hi. It is nice to know who's on and watching. So if you're able to, then do just pop in, and just, even if you just say hi, then that would be fantastic, because it'd be lovely to know who we've got on board. That sounded a little like that Radio 1 DJ now, Shane. And for one particular person who I know doesn't always watch live, but I know that she does always watch back, this evening's performance of Confidence Garden Question Time is being brought to you by Yogi Tea. And tonight we've got Women's Energy, and interestingly enough, hi Graham, it says on here, because Yogi Tea always has a little saying on the back, and this one tonight, which I thought was very apt when I pulled it out, was a relaxed mind is a creative mind. So it's a women's tea, and I'm hoping that you've got something lovely to be drinking this evening whilst we have a conversation. So I'm just going to dip over on here, because something I am noticing is that sometimes with the Facebook Live, is that it doesn't always bring things up to date for people. So please make sure that you just keep refreshing if you have challenges with the connection. At the moment, fingers crossed, this evening it is saying that the connection on here is, it usually just says that it's a weak connection if it's not a great one. And this evening it seems to be, fingers crossed, okay. So, boundaries. If you haven't got a pen and paper with you this evening, I really would invite you to. I'm sorry, I just spotted Hannah's question. What a great question to start off with. Where can you buy women's tea in Energy Tea in York? Tulliver's, which is opposite Barnett's. They're a bit of advertising for Tulliver's and Barnett's as well. On Collier Gate. Is it Collier Gate? I think it's Collier Gate. That's where I got my women's tea from, Hannah, and it's lovely to have you here. So I'm glad I'm doing. Hopefully she's not run off to go and buy it because it is closed this evening. Anyway, back on topic. Is that called product placement? I'm sure it is. So boundaries are a huge. They are setting boundaries, sticking to boundaries, having those boundaries. It's a huge topic, and there are a number of things that I want to cover this evening, and I will be inviting you to write things down. So my thing's going crazy. Let me just see if I can add something on here and see if that helps. Because I've got somebody who's saying they're desperately trying to get on and see if this works. Let's get rid of that and see if I tag him in there. Hopefully, Alex, that'll mean you can get on board. So yeah, so boundaries are a really big topic, and as I say, they can cover so many different aspects of our lives. So I am going to keep things kind of fairly big picture with it, but I do go by the adage that I think that how we do one thing is how we do many things. So even if it does mean that I might be directly, or it may sound like I'm directly talking about this in relation to relationships or about setting boundaries where work is concerned, or even finances or health or whatever it may be, see if you can take the information and translate it across. And that's why I think having a pen and paper would be a really great idea, to be able to capture some of those notes and be able to see what you can do for yourself to help yourself where boundaries are concerned. And I really want to kick off with a question for you to start thinking about, which is, where do you know that you do set boundaries? Where do you know that you do set boundaries? Because we're all going to have areas of our lives where we kind of have those boundaries and we stick to them. And that could be, again, across absolutely anything. It could be in certain relationships, family members, friends, intimate partners. It could be in business, it could be in work, it could be in your career, it could be in your education, it could be all sorts of different things. But what I want you to do is, you're welcome, Alex. What I want you to do is think about where you know that you do set boundaries. Now, whilst you're thinking about that, I want to offer you this as well, because what I want you to think about is my take on why boundaries are so important, and why I'm linking this in with confidence is because, from my perspective, there is a correlation very strongly between the boundaries that we set or don't set. Hi, Ellie. So the boundaries that we set and that we don't set versus how we then perceive ourselves and how we interact and relate with ourselves with that. Because what I want you to think about is the boundaries really are around what we are prepared to accept. So if we don't set boundaries, if we're not strong with those boundaries, if we're not very clear for ourselves what those boundaries are, we're not really clear what we're prepared to accept and what we're not prepared to accept, what we're prepared to tolerate or what we're not prepared to tolerate, or we're not clear for ourselves what our standards are, versus what we just kind of go, yeah, whatever with. And there are certain things that we can then end up getting upset with other people about, angry about other people, disillusioned with other people, but we haven't clearly stated our boundaries. We haven't clearly set our expectations. So for me, I suppose, even though I'm not a parent, I was a step parent for a number of years, nearly 10 years. And as a step parent, one of the things that I learned very early on going into a relationship where my youngest stepson was at 8, I think, when I met him. My eldest stepson at that point was about 12, nearly 13. And it became very evident to me that sometimes I could be really far too strong on those boundaries, and other times I could be very, very flexible on those boundaries. And what became really clear from that relationship between myself and my stepsons was, for them and their age, it was kind of quite confusing, really, because there were times when I was very rigid, very strong. These are the boundaries. That's it. You can't go outside of them. And then there are other times where it was kind of like those boundaries just kind of collapsed, and it didn't take that much to kind of shove them over. And not only was that impacting on me, but it was impacting on the boys as well. And I started to have to look at boundaries in a different way, and started to look at, what am I prepared to accept versus what am I not prepared to accept. And what that made me have to face for myself was those times where I was being rigid, and those times where I was kind of like letting the boundaries just flop away, was more about that I was worried how the other person would perceive me. How in this instance with the boys, I was worried whether they would accept me as a stepmom, whether they'd listen to me. And so therefore I would kind of either try and have these boundaries and take control and try and force that being liked kind of side of things, like trying to be the stern, good step parent. Or I was so concerned out of fear that they would rebel against me, that I kind of backed away from it. So there was no consistency from me internally, and there was no consistency from them, for them rather. There was no consistency from them either, because they were children. And I think what it made me realise was that correlation and the value and the importance of setting boundaries, because if we don't set those boundaries, we're not showing other people very clearly what we are prepared to accept and what we're not prepared to accept. So one of the conversations that I've had recently, and even though this has happened recently, it's I've lost count of the amount of times I've had this kind of conversation with clients. It usually is women, but it's not always with women. And I'll just cut to the chase with exactly what was said to me, which was, people are always taking from me. They're just taking from me all the time. And this person said, quite frankly, they're taking the piss now. And I said, well, let's look at this. I said, if somebody's going to be taking from you, you have to a certain degree, be doing the giving. Now, whether that is literal of a physical sense of it, or whether it is with our time, whether it is with our leniency, with our rules, whatever it may be, our standards, what we're prepared to accept or not, we have to take responsibility that it's us that's allowing that to happen. If somebody is take from you, rather than get annoyed and upset and angry and frustrated, or whatever the right word may be, at them, how about hitting pause for a moment and recognizing that it's you that is doing the giving, because people can't take unless you're prepared to give. And as long as we can recognize and take responsibility for our part in that, it's not about blaming them for doing the taking either. It really is about us taking responsibility. So does that make sense? Are people kind of getting an understanding of this? I'm realising my voice went in a very odd tonality then. I think it's because I'm quite thirsty. So let me know what your thoughts are on this topic as we go through, because as I said at the beginning, there are so many different aspects around boundaries, and people are going to have their own experiences, their own stories, their own life view on things. And I'm interested to hear about that. I want to know what this means to you, and have you come up with an answer to the question that I gave you right at the beginning, which was, she says, desperately trying to remember it. Where do you know that you set boundaries? Where do you know that you set boundaries? Ellie says, definitely. I'm assuming you mean definitely making sense. Thank you, Ellie. Okay, so why is it so important to set these boundaries then? It's the, thank you, Graham. Yes, it does make sense. Excellent. You've hit my life exactly at the moment. Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, I seem to be doing that with a lot of people at the moment. I had people come on the Truth About Confidence course, which I ran in last Saturday in York, and they a number of them said, "I just happened your information about it just happened to land right at that moment in time." So it seems to be happening for people at the moment. Hannah says, "Yes, I'm a doula." Ah, yes, of course you are a doula. And it has been a huge learning curve, being accountable for what I give in a vastly grey area. Yeah, and I mean, gosh, as a doula in particular, for those of you who don't know what a doula is, I don't know all of the technicalities around it, Hannah, so I apologise if I get it incorrect. But it's somebody who is around with a woman and the father as well, with the process of birthing, and everything leading up to that through to the actual birth, as I believe it. And that's where those boundaries can be blurred, because there is a grey area. You know, what's my responsibility? What's somebody else's responsibility? And I think that's where the challenge comes in, where parenting is concerned, because, you know, am I being too strict or am I being too lenient? And where do I need to be on that spectrum in order for me to know what I'm prepared to accept and be strong, confident, congruent with that? But equally, what does the child that I'm interacting with, what do they need? What are the boundaries that are going to be helpful and resourceful for them? I know that quite a while back I was around a teenager whose parents believed in full-on liberalism, let them do whatever, it's no problem. And I had a conversation with the teenager and they said, it's great. I love my parents for feeling that they have the confidence and courage within themselves to do that with me. And he said, but sometimes I just need something to push against, and there's nothing to push against. So I don't feel like I'm being as guided as I could be. So I don't think there's a hard and fast right rule with any of this, by the way. And that's why, where boundaries are concerned, I think what's really important is to look around, rather than thinking about it from the word boundary perspective, because I think boundaries, to me, every time I say boundaries, I see fences, which then, you know, is quite, this is my bit, that's your bit, and all of this kind of thing. Is think about it more, or my offering invitation is think about it more in, what am I prepared to accept? What am I prepared to tolerate? What are my standards? And where does that work and where doesn't that work? So Alex has said, I wonder if you have ever had problems backing down from boundaries you've created before you had a real understanding. I worry about making boundaries in case I block good things out of ignorance. Well, okay, so that's a really good question, Alex. I think, talking from my own personal perspective, I think I could have done with learning about boundaries a lot sooner in my life, and would have and think that if I'd have set those boundaries, certain things in my life wouldn't have happened. But who knows what would have happened instead? I don't know. I don't have any regrets, and I wouldn't go back and change anything. But it is about looking at it's very easy. Hindsight is a great thing. When you get to a certain point in your life, you can go, oh, well, if I'd have known this, then I wouldn't have done X, Y, and Z. I think going from what you've said there, where boundaries are concerned, I think that, and this is where for me it links in with trust, and that's why I like looking at it from that sense of what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, is starting to look at what works for you. Now, I know that you're not somebody who likes to go down the mainstream route, Alex. I know that you're somebody who likes to play around with the boundaries that society provides. And I think it's about, I have a rule, a saying for myself, which I created for myself to help myself, which is be true to myself, be authentic to self, and considerate of others. Be authentic to self and considerate of others. So there are times where I'll set boundaries. So for example, I used to just say yes to any kind of invite to go out, to be with friends, to be with family. And I would just go, yep, I'll be there. Now, actually, what I began to realise is, for me personally, is that's not what I always wanted to do. And to then cope with being in the situations that I didn't want to be in, I'd taken my responsibility. I'd said yes. I put myself there. That's where I would heavily drink, or I would start taking drugs, and I would do stuff like that to cope. I think something's just been delivered through the door. There's an odd noise. And it really is about recognizing that if we're doing those kinds of odd behaviors that aren't necessarily useful or resourceful to ourselves, and we know that we know that, even if it's just late at night or early in the morning or at some point during the day, we know that we have done something, not necessarily something bad, but we know we've done something that's kind of like, that didn't fit right for me. I don't know why I did that. And rather than beat yourself up, one of my other kind of phrases that I use a lot is be kind with what you find. When you see that you've done something, or when you know that you've done something which has overstepped a boundary for you or for somebody else, don't beat yourself up about it, because that's futile. There's no point in doing that. That's not going to do anything other than make you feel crap. So be aware of what you've done, and look at how you could do it differently, and look at, and again, I'm going to use the same word again. Okay, so what would be acceptable in the future? Now, for me, I use my personal life because I think it's easier to talk about, and I think it helps. If it doesn't, I'm sure people will let me know. But I know that I've said yes to a lot of things, whether it be social or whether it be work, both in the business that I run now and in my previous career. Just said yes, and I had no boundaries because I thought I had to, and that was the polite thing to do, and I should turn up, and that's what you're meant to do. And I didn't have any of those boundaries. It wasn't, to me, it wasn't acceptable to say no. So I had to go through that process of recognizing there were so many times that I found myself uncomfortable, that I then had to hit that, okay, what is acceptable, and check in with myself and say, do you know what? I need to say no to this. And that might be saying no to going to a party, or saying no to an invite somewhere else, or a piece of work, or whatever it may be. It's about having that. It's about self-respect, really. And to be honest, in my experience, that doesn't mean it's necessarily an easy thing to do. And I think that's the challenge that we have, is that we think that because we've set the boundary and we've stuck to the boundary and we have to stick to the boundary, or we've changed the boundary, that it's going to be easy and we're going to find it comfortable. And actually, I don't think that's always the truth. And I think the more that we can be okay with being uncomfortable, okay with feeling uncertain, okay with the fact that we've said no to something and it feels odd because we usually say yes, that's where we can start to step into our own power. So I've kind of waffled on quite a lot there, Alex. I hope that's actually given you some answers. I know you've put something else up here. Ellie says, for a long time I became incredibly frustrated at people taking all the time. And it's only recently I've realised it's because I never said no. It's taken a while to stop feel guilty for saying no, but I know it's the right thing to do, and I don't get annoyed with them anymore. Hashtag unlearning the habits of a lifetime. I love that, Ellie. So something I would offer out, because Ellie's brought up the G word, is why have we conditioned ourselves to feel guilty about putting ourselves first? Not in a rude way, not in a mean way, not in an arrogant way, not in a excuse my language, but F everybody else. I don't mean in that way, but why are we feeling guilty when we say no? Now, if we're setting a new boundary, and especially if it's loved ones, family, friends, intimate partners, and we've set a new boundary, if we haven't spoken that through with them, if they're used to you behaving in a certain way and all of a sudden you've gone no, then yeah, of course that's going to cause a reaction. That's going to cause a bit of a challenge for them. So just be mindful of that, because sometimes, not always, it's worth giving them a bit of an explanation, a bit of understanding as to why you're now saying no when you would normally have said yes, and kind of letting them in. not about making them wrong, not about making you wrong, not about making either of you right either. It really is about checking in for yourself and saying this is what's right for me. This is why. I recognise the impact on you. So let's work on it together. Sometimes people will be great with that and they'll listen, and other times people won't. So you're just going to kind of have to work with that. So thank you for sharing that, Ellie. But guilty is the only good thing about feeling guilty. And I think I do personally believe that it's a constructed emotion, as most emotions are, but that's a whole different topic. Is that sometimes it can motivate us to do things differently, but I don't think it's a great place to be. Self-flagellation never helped anybody change anything, in my view. Anyway, so thank you for that. Unlearning the habits of a lifetime. Alex, I need you to make some stickers. I see your card all the time, and it always forces me to reframe my perspective on things. Alex, feel free, my darling. No, I've toyed around with this idea for quite some time, actually. For those of you who haven't seen my business cards, I've got postcards as well. They have sayings on them and questions and various different things. And that's exactly the purpose of them and why I've done them the way that I have. And I have a number of people who say that they have got them. It was lovely. I went to a client's office over in Australia earlier this year and walked into her office, and there were 2 of the postcards up on the wall. So that's the purpose of them, to make you think. If you'd like stickers as well, okay, I'll look into that. I'm also looking at a couple of other things at the moment, so give me some time. You're asking for merchandise. I hear you. Okay, that's cool. Thanks, Alex. Alex, they could say Jules Wyman Fan Club, come and join us. We could stick them on everyone we meet. That's really sweet. Okay, so Alex and Ellie are now having a love-in. That's great. You two would get on very, very well. Graham says, guilt is the strongest emotion I've ever felt. Oh, bless you, Graham. Okay, so guilt is something that is so perpetuated. And I'm just going to offer this up because I don't want to step away from the boundaries. Here you go. Here's me setting a boundary. I would love to talk about guilt, and I am going to put a note down here to do something about guilt at some point. So he's setting a boundary. So Graham, what I would love to do is talk about that at another time so that we can dive into it in a lot more depth, because it's such a big topic. And there are so many things that we can go into with that. And I want to, where possible at the moment, especially as we've been going for half an hour already, is look at if there's anything else around boundaries and setting those boundaries. So what I would love to do is, can you have a think for me, Graham? Thank you for all the thumbs. Can you have a think for me, Graham, is around what question would you like answered around guilt? What question would you like answered around guilt? And you can either pop it straight underneath this video, or if you want to, you can direct message me. If you prefer to do it in email, you can do jules@juleswyman.com. And let's have that as maybe next week's topic, all about guilt. I'm ever so thirsty tonight. It's all this talking malarkey. Maybe it's that women's energy, Hannah. It's kind of popping up. What I will offer out is this question, which may seem a little odd. How am I creating this guilt? How am I creating this guilt? Now, be mindful of what I'm saying is not why am I creating this guilt? How? How am I creating this guilt? Now, you may immediately come up with some answers, and that's great. What I would invite you to do, Graham and Ellie, because it was a word that you brought up as well, and anybody else that's on here watching, is to really think about that question. If you're somebody who meditates from an inquiry perspective, then take the question into a meditation, or just use it when you're in the shower, or getting dressed, or cooking, or doing something. But ask yourself, how am I creating this emotion? How am I creating guilt in this instance? How am I creating it? So one of the reasons I hope that makes sense, Graham, let me know. Oh, you've put will do, bless you. Excellent, thank you. So one of the One of the reasons I wanted to bring up boundaries is, as I said at the beginning, it's because it comes up quite a lot in conversation, and because people seem to have this fear. I'm going to put the word fear around boundaries. Now, I've mentioned this before around fear, and my perception, my current take on it. So I want to give some background with it. Very big picture thinking is that I think there are two main types of fear. If we're going to take every fear back, they kind of come from two main areas. So when that noise went earlier and it sounded like somebody was coming in my front door, hi Kate, it sounded like somebody was coming in my front door. So my primal fear started to kick off. And in that moment, I could feel that the primal fear, the primal mind rather, kicking off. Am I safe? So I'm facing the door. I'm behind the table. So worst case scenario, I could have hidden under the table, or thrown my big mug at whoever was breaking in. But there was nobody there, and because I could pause for that moment, and I could check in with myself, I could hear that my gate had gone again, and therefore somebody had put something through the letterbox. To me, internally, I can go to that primal mind, stand down, everything's fine, I'm perfectly safe. So that's one type of fear, is that primal fear. It's the fight, flight or freeze stuff that keeps us safe. And I certainly want that to be there, because that's the thing that keeps me alive, that keeps me going, that protects me, and does you too. But then there's this second type of fear, and it's big picture thinking that I'm talking about here. And that second type of fear is coming from our psychological mind, our thinking brain. And that's the bit that thinks all this stuff. So whether it's thinking the stuff about boundaries or acceptance or guilt or anything else, it's all coming from that thinking mind. And that thinking, that psychological brain creates so much of that stuff for us. And what happens where boundaries are concerned is quite often we think that we trace it back. It goes back to the I'm only worth X when I do Y. So, or I have this rule that I'm only worth X, and therefore that enables for me to behave in a certain way, and therefore others to treat me in a certain way. And a real turning point for me, and I cannot remember when I first read this quote, or even I can't attribute it to somebody because I can't remember where it came from. But the quote is that people treat you the way you allow them to treat you. People treat you the way you allow them to treat you. And this is where the boundary stuff comes in. So people treat you the way that you allow them to treat you. Well, if my perception of myself is that I'm worth less than my boss, if I'm hi Joe, if I'm thinking that I'm worth less than my boss, for example, because they're smarter, they earn more money, they're in charge of the company, whatever it may be. If I'm perceiving that I'm less than them, then of course I'm going to allow them to treat me in that way. I'm going to allow them, that hierarchical side of things, to be treated in that way. Whereas when I set the boundaries of I'm of as value as my boss, even though my boss has got a higher level position, earns more money, higher educated, more experienced, whatever it may be, but I place myself on an equal footing. So that means that when the boss is coming in and charging me with stuff to do, or telling me what to do, or this kind of stuff, is I'm not going to immediately be going in like a bull in a china shop and headbutting and going, well, I've got my boundaries, I'm just as valuable as you kind of side of things. It's more recognizing that we're both of worth, and I've got value and ideas to bring to the table. And somewhere where this really did show up for me was when I was working in theatre. I used to be a stage manager, and more specifically when I was a deputy stage manager. The role of deputy stage manager is that you're in the rehearsal room with all of the cast, and usually you're sat next to the director. I'm pointing that side because the director I work with most used to sit on my right hand side. And I know that at that point, when I was very low in confidence and low in self-esteem, and didn't have that much of I didn't value who I was. I certainly didn't value this side of my education in any way, shape or form. I used to hold my these directors and the majority of the actors, because they were the ones that were going to be seen by the audience. So, you know, why would I want to go anywhere? They're amazing. I would hold all these people in this high esteem, but my esteem, my self-esteem was down here. And therefore I didn't necessarily think that anything that I could contribute to the room was of value, because I didn't perceive that I was of value. And then I remember one day, it was over a coffee break, I was having a conversation with one of the actors, and they were struggling with a particular part of their character, of what was going on. And I said to them, well, have you thought about it from this angle? And it was just them and I having a conversation, and she and I got on quite well. And I said, have you thought about it from this angle? And she just paused and her eyes just went like that. She went, you have to share that, because we could all do with that. And it was to do with the character and how the character was relating to some of the other characters in that particular scene. And then we went back into the rehearsal room, and I was like, no, don't, just you do it. And anyway, she played this out, and the director went, you've nailed it. What have you done differently? She said, it wasn't my idea, actually. It was Jules. And of course, that psychological fear that I was talking about kicked in of, oh my God, I'm going to get into trouble. I've said something wrong. The director's going to tell me off. Who am I to have said something like this? And she explained, and she said, and just by seeing it at that different angle, it gave me the opportunity to blah, blah, blah. And this whole discussion came about. And I remember my director looking over and went, you need to speak out more often. And it was just that little moment that kind of made me go, oh, so even though I'm not as qualified as them, I haven't got that level of education, I haven't got as much experience, actually I could be seeing something that could be of value. Now, the thing that changed for me then was recognizing that shifting level of worth. And it wasn't that I went up here, it was recognizing there was some equality in there. Does this make sense? Can you see how this links in with boundaries? Amanda's saying, so true. Ellie says, that sounds like something that my daughter would think. Is this a common teenage feeling of fear? Ellie, can you elaborate on that a little bit for me? Because I've waffled on a little bit over and after that, so I'm not really sure what that specifically relates to. So a common teenage fear, maybe that was around, I'm getting lots of hearts and likes, so I'm assuming that this is making sense for people, so this is great. So where teenagers are concerned, there is so much peer pressure, there's so much the psychological brain is kicking in for all of us, and it starts to really come into the force what the terrible twos are about. You know, the big chunk of that is where the psychological brain is developing, and so that fear side of things can kick in with teenagers around fear. So it is around the feeling of worth versus others. It's not just a teenage thing, Ellie. It's far too many people on this planet. It's one of the reasons why I get so passionate about what I do. It's one of the reasons I get so upset that more people don't recognize this for themselves. It's why I do free stuff. That's why I put on events. It's why I, even though there are times when I do question, why am I doing what I'm doing? That's exactly why, because I want people to understand their own genuine self-worth, not in competition with anybody else, regardless of whether they're a teenager, regardless of whether they're a cleaner or a janitor, or whether they're 48 years old, as Amanda's just said. I want people to recognize that as you are right now, you are already of worth. You are already of value. And in my experience, when we know this for ourselves, when we genuinely have this for ourselves, we don't go into competition with other people. We recognize and settle into our own self-worth and knowing of who we are, which means we become even more comfortable with setting those boundaries of, yeah, I want to get this done for me, or I want to do this for me, not anybody else. We don't do things out of obligation. I'm loving all the thumbs and the hearts. We do it for us. We're doing it for ourselves, not for other people. So it's not something we're taught, and very, very early on in the education system, in pretty much every education system, not all, I know, we're immediately put into competition with others. We put on these tables and like literal tables. We had the thickie table when I went to school. Believe it or not, it was literally called the thickie table. So you can imagine anybody who was sat on that table, what they perceived their worth was. You had the smart Alex, and you had the geeky ones, and people immediately, we start doing that in school, and some of that does partly come from the primal side of things, where we're trying to find our place within a tribe. But to me, it's about recognizing your worth, whether you're the cleaner or whether you're the head teacher, or it genuinely is recognizing your own worth and your own value as you are right now, without changing anything about you. And when you can really get that, setting those boundaries becomes even easier for you. Hannah, you are doing amazing work. Thank you. So much self-worth issues come from battling egos. Thank you. Bless you, Hannah. The lovely ego. So, Hannah, stop battling your ego. Stop it. Leave your ego alone. Let your ego just do what your ego does, which is it's going to tell you, or anybody else as it does, how great or amazing, or you should do better, and it's going to want more. And the ego, which really is the psychological mind, has got so much stuff going on there. And I do think, I made a video earlier today. I haven't quite looked at whether it's going to air or not, because on the YouTube channel, not from an egoic perspective, just more because I waffled on and I wasn't particularly clear in my message. But it's about how social media is really perpetuating and actually nurturing this I'm not worthy, this narcissism. People posting constant. I'm gobsmacked at the amount of people that post selfies, that are just every day, and they always have to be altered and are at the right angle and all of this. And they're now showing that people have got an addiction, and addictions are being nurtured through it. And that's ego. That's the ego that is craving the please. And I know that I ask for thumbs up and hearts and all of that on this, but that's to help these videos reach other people, because when you give it a thumbs up, your friends get to know that you're liking something, which helps people come to this. And I'm just so passionate about wanting people to understand their own self-worth. That's what I'm asking for it for. So we have to be so careful with whether we are getting hooked into this egoic, like me, love me, validation kind of side of things. Alex says, it's so hard to believe that, coming from a framework of competitive programming that measures self-worth only as compared to other. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the challenge, Alex, is the psychological mind is its whole frame. What it's meant to do is measure. That's what it's about. It's about measurement and judgment, or measurement. It's a calculation. It's how does this thing measure up against me? Because it's trying to find, this is the, going to use the word that Hannah has, of battling. This is the challenge that we have, is that unconsciously that is what it's doing all the time. Is it's looking to see, where am I placed in amongst the world? How do I relate to, and what is going to happen if, and how can I change, and all of these different things. So it's not easy to step away from that. And I wish there was a quick way. I wish there was a magic pill. I wish there was a magic wand, silver bullet, whatever you would prefer. But there isn't. It does take time, and it does take practice, and it is possible. I'm not saying that I'm fully there yet, but I do know that I'm way further along the journey than I hadn't realised how far. I've had some things happen in my personal life in the last few weeks that have made me realise just how strong, confident and clear I have become on things, even when it is sad, painful, upsetting, unnerving, etc., etc., doesn't mean to say that you can't set those boundaries, be strong and stick with them because of that self-worth side of things. So it's not easy, Alex, because it is pre-programmed for that comparison and from that competitive side. And what I would offer for you to think of is that you're, as a man, you're also going to have that competition side of things is slightly different than it is for females, because it's got that you're more naturally driven as a man from that competitive side of things. So just try and be mindful as to, and I know the kind of beautiful work and practices that you do, and you're probably as much, if not more, dedicated to a lot of this work than I am. But it is really important to look at, is it coming from that kind of primal caveman competitive side of things, or is it coming from that psychological mind of things? And you can kind of take a step back and look at it in see how it can help you. Trout pouts, yeah, exactly. Don't know what you mean, Ellie. Alex says, practice has done me great so far. Brilliant. Great distinction. You're welcome. It's not, none of this is easy stuff. I really, really wish it was. It's just not. My genuine ambition is at some point for me to, well, not just me, but for this job not to really be required. I can't necessarily see that happening. Not in the near future. I hope it does happen in my lifetime. I might have to live for quite some time. I don't know, because this stuff has been around and been talked about in so many different ways. I think the great thing these days is that this is where social media does come into its foray, and it is so beautiful and helpful, is the fact that, you know, Alex is on the east coast of the States. I know that some of you, Hannah and Ellie and Joe, are in New York. The rest of you that are watching, I don't know where you are, either in the UK or beyond, but this is where social media does have its great value, to be able to reach out and help other people. And the fact that people can share their insights, their thoughts is so beautiful where that's concerned. That's what makes it worth talking about. Thank you, Alex. So, boundaries then. Anything else anybody wants to ask? Has had an insight maybe from this evening's conversation? I kind of lose track of time, and I've just looked back over that it's now coming up for 10 to 8 in the UK. And I know that Facebook Live only allows us to be live for an hour. So we've only got about 10 minutes really to kind of have this conversation. So does it make sense about boundaries and setting boundaries and the purpose behind them? And go back to that question that I asked right at the beginning. Do you know where you do set boundaries? And I would now follow that on with, do you know where you don't? And having had the discussion that we've had this evening, how and where can you now look at setting those boundaries? Be that in work, be that in relationships with friends or family members or loved ones, or, well, hopefully the loved ones and the family members and friends are all in the same camp. They may not be. With work colleagues, with neighbours, whatever it may be, how and where can you set those boundaries? How and where can you set those boundaries for yourself? When you base it on that what is acceptable rule that I was talking about as well, when you make something acceptable, have you got a behaviour that you do that is maybe only you know that you do, and you don't have to confess on here or anything, but maybe that's something there that you think, by doing that behaviour behind closed doors, as it were, I know that's impacting my self-worth, and actually, could I make that unacceptable to do that behaviour and actually step into my own self-worth where that's concerned, step up that boundary, make it unacceptable for me to do that. And that might be a new way of playing around with it. So I think I've waffled enough to give you enough time to type any last comments or anything that you would like to around boundaries. As far as I'm aware, let me just double check that I haven't... oh, no, next week. Good job I checked. So next week, So I'm going to waffle for a little bit, just for any of you that are frantically trying to type a question or a comment or an insight down below. Then I'll waffle so that you've got the opportunity to do that before I get kicked off Facebook Live. Next Monday, so Monday the 12th of September, have I got that correct? Yes. There will not be a Facebook Live confident. I still go to say gardener's question time. Confidence question time. It will be moved, as all great TV programs are. It's going to be moved to Tuesday of next week. So Tuesday, the 13th of September, same time, 7 p.m. UK. It's because this is me setting boundaries, because I have a reunion with some gorgeous people that I haven't seen for a while. So yes, so that was the only night that we could all make. So I'm rescheduling it to the Tuesday night next week. So it's on the 13th at 7 p.m. Be on here. Now, if you have a question, I've already offered that out to Graham. If guilt is something that you experience a lot of and want to know more about that, then have a think about framing up the confidence surgery. Oh, that sounds a little bit clinical, Ellie. Confidence clinic? Oh, I don't know. I love the ideas though. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. So if it's around guilt, if you want to talk about guilt, or if you want to have some insights around that, then direct message me your question. If it's in relation to that, then put that in the subject heading. If you've got another question, then you're like, Alex is like in surgery as well. Then please again message me your question. You can either put it underneath this video, you can put it on the Confidence Garden page at any point, or again you can direct message me through that as well. The whole point is all about will you guys stop it with the creche and the operation and surgery? The whole point is this is about you. This is about your time, and I'm not saying that I've got all the answers, not in any way, shape, or form. I'm still learning about this stuff. I have things happen in my life, and I want to do whatever I can to support you. And it may be that you ask something that I don't necessarily have an answer to, but I might be able to, from the coaching perspective, reframe the question in a way that it gives you the support to be able to look for the answer for yourself. So that's the whole purpose around it. And I'm here to support you, to do whatever I can. So you just got to make sure that you're kind of chucking the information at me, as it were, as to what you want, what you need. And I know that one of the things that people said that what they wanted was a live event. So I do have the one I've just done was on 3rd of September, on Saturday just gone, The Truth About Confidence, and we're redoing that again on the 16th of October, and that is the last live event of 2016. So if you are in the UK, or even if you want to fly in from the States, Alex, go on, I dare you. Now there's a bet. I wonder whether you'd take me up on that. Not sure if I've redirected the page fully. So if you go to if you go to thetruthaboutconfidence.com, it will be showing the 3rd of September event, but if you scroll down to the bottom, it will have the link for the 16th of October, and you can book your ticket there. The food was phenomenal. Going through the feedback forms, people were saying they loved it. They loved the practicality of it, the accessibility of it, the fact that it was a space that they could talk openly because they knew that I would share openly and support. And I think somebody said something about they felt open to talk but never felt forced, which they were really, really pleased about. So I think I've waffled enough now for those of you who wanted to type. Graham, yeah, please do, Graham, have a think about your question. Either post it in here or send me a message. And Alex, I'm expecting you on a flight. I don't know, next week. Will you be able to make it next week? Come and do a co-presenting with me. That would be hilarious. So thank you all so much for joining me this evening. I probably have about 6 minutes before I get booted off, if that. It's been a pleasure as ever. I love the interactions, the fun, the playfulness, the quizzicalness, the insights, the thoughts, and you're very welcome as well, Graham. Please do feel free to share this video with anybody that you know has a challenge with boundaries, be it teenage daughters, sons, mums, cousins, aunts, friends, work colleagues, whatever it may be. Invite them to this page, invite them to the confidence question time / surgery / crash / clinic, whatever it is for next week. Remember, it's Tuesday, 7 p.m. here on Facebook Live. And thank you again. Thank you, Ellie, for tonight as well. And thank you, Amanda, and all the others that have joined in and played. And I look forward to speaking to you again next week. Take care. Bye.